I'm really grateful to be able to present this lecture tonight because it's a wonderful blessing. I keep thinking that they say that you can't pursue spiritual growth until your belly is filled, right? If you're suffering and if you're being bombed, like in some countries, or you're starving, you really can't devote yourself to a spiritual path. But I'm not sure if that's true, but it's more or less true, right? Certainly. So here we are, affluent people, relatively speaking, able to get together and proceed with our development. So we have a responsibility, right, to body these lectures forth into the world and do some good and show up
I have another one
with the help of these lectures.
Hi,
Jordan. Hi, Jordan. Anyway, I just said good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and let me just talk about this lecture now. This lecture is the first one I attended in person.
Wow.
I was 15.
Baptism by fire.
That was in November of 1971.
Must have been divinely arranged. Usually it is. Right?
Hey, Barbara. Hi. I was just saying hello, and I was mentioning that this first lecture I attended in person. I wonder, were you there, Marion, or were you there, Barbara? Because this was back in 1971. I was 15. And
was that when they were still in Eva's apartment?
In the loft in Bill and Claire, Soho.
Yeah.
And there is at the very end of the lecture, it talks about the beautiful, overwhelming feeling that occurred within the group there. And we do remember that. And it was like the whole room was levitating. It was like amazing. The energy that was there at the end of this lecture. Sorry? Yeah, sure. This was a guide session. Eva went into trance, and then the guy delivered the lecture, and then we all had this amazing kind of beautiful feeling after the lecture. Wow. All right, so here we go. Identification and intentionality. Identification with the spiritual self to overcome negative intentionality. This lecture, I will demarcate various parts of the lecture, but there are some keys to understanding this lecture, I think. There are also some very poignant and insightful quotes in this lecture that I've always remembered, maybe more than any others in the Pathwork. The first key I want to talk about is on page 3. Guide says, you will find that the more frustrated you feel for not attaining what you so ardently desire, the greater your inner negative intention and the less inclination you have to deal with it. This correlation is extremely important. The same applies to doubts. The more you fear that what you want will not materialize, the less faith you have in your life and the less connected you are with your own negative will. Now that is obviously 3 sentences to really meditate on. The more frustrated you feel for not attaining what you so ardently desire, the greater your inner negative intention and the less inclination you have to deal with it. So the more frustration you feel, the more you have an inner desire not to receive what you desire. Another key sentence, page 2.
Then the paragraph.
Yeah, paragraph 2 on page 2. It is an important fact of human psychology that whatever people fear, they unconsciously want. And whatever they experience, they also unconsciously want. The entire Pathwork is based on this true fact of life. Wow. That's earth-shaking, really.
That's crazy.
Madness. I mean, it's true, but it's very shocking when you think about it. Whatever people fear, they unconsciously want. Whatever they experience, they also unconsciously want. I think that's part of the psychology of horror movies, right? You really want it, and you're afraid at the same time. It's undeniable, right? In the experience of watching horror films, I think. Then the third one, quote key is.
What paragraph?
On page 2,
Yeah.
paragraph 5.
Mhm.
The mere fact that you know that you are the one who wants isolation, loneliness, lovelessness, hate, and spite, instead of blaming some fate that befalls the innocent you, is a key to finding the next link in the chain of your evolution. So this lecture is about this concept of negative intentionality. Now, there's a difference between negativity and negative intentionality that the guide talks about. But I just see negative intentionality as like a profoundly spiteful desire not to move, not to change, and not to proceed in the way that's beneficial, that helps you. Like you know the way out, but you don't want to take it. It's sort of like the devil in Paradise Lost says, "Non serviam," I will not serve, against God. Now, of course, it wasn't really about serving. That was his ego distortion, right? It wasn't about, I will not serve. I guess it was more like, I will not participate. That was the truth. It's not about serving. It's a misconception, right? You don't buckle down to God, but you serve the greater good for all people, for everyone. But there's a spiteful element in negative intentionality that I see as the key to it. The deliberate undermining of your best self. Maybe that's another way to look at it. So there's negativity, there's negative intentionality, and then there's the lower self. All of those are distinct concepts. So the guide, this lecture I divide into 4 parts. The first one is the pathwork process, the pathwork promise, rather.
What page you on?
Page 1, paragraph
Okay.
1, paragraph 1. Let the power of spirit enliven you, live and manifest through you. Then you will be in the real world and your life will have meaning. You who truly want to find out who you are and are prepared to make the sacrifice of giving up old destructive patterns of thinking and reacting will discover the incomparable treasure within you. Then the word sacrifice becomes indeed ludicrous, for you give up nothing to gain everything. Now, then the guy talks about,
That's the gospel, right?
that is the gospel, that's right. I mean, that's very much like the Christian gospel, which is right. And that's the whole, right, central concept in Christianity, maybe other religions too, right? You give up, it seems like a sacrifice, but what you're doing is you're dying to your ego and gaining everything.
Crucifying.
Right, the crucifixion of the ego.
Yeah.
Now, he says, in the past few months, a powerful new energy has been generated by the efforts of each individual as well as by the group as a whole. Talks about the energies that are being developed or circulating in the pathwork. And this is, of course, in 1971. But the way I think about it is, I'm like giving up the concept of time. I'm like saying it's something that happens outside of time, a kind of gathering of energy. And it's something that exists. I don't want to say that it happened in 1971. I want to say that it kind of resonates through time. That's the way I look at it. So that's the first page, the pathwork promise. In other words, you can get this if you go through the process of self-facing. Then, second part,
What page?
starting on page 2. Then he talks about the concept of negative intentionality. What is, first paragraph, what exactly it is. You know, what is it? It's not the same thing as negativity. Like I said before, negative intentionality has to do with an intent to turn away from the best inside you, to undermine your own, the direction you know you should go in. But often it's unconscious. And he makes a distinction between negativity and negative intentionality at the end of last paragraph on page 2. Negativity comprises a wide range of feelings, including false hostility, reality distortions, envy, hate, fear, pride, and anger, to name a few. But when we speak of negative intentionality, we mean expressly the intention to hold on to the state of negating life and the self. The mere word intention connotes that the self is in charge and makes a deliberate choice, intending to do, act, and to be in a certain way. Now, even when you own up to the destructive, cruel, and brutal attitudes, you always give an impression that you cannot help being the way that you are. However, when you ferret out your negative intentionality, you can no longer deceive yourself that negativity just happens to you. You must sooner or later come to terms with the fact that your life is the result of your choices. All right. The third part, beginning on page 3, second paragraph, is about the stages of understanding negative intentionality. First of all, you cannot have the awareness that that exists. You don't, that you feel that off the top, you feel like there's no part of me where I deliberately want to subvert the best in myself. There's no part of me that has a negative intent toward life. But eventually, if the pathwork progresses, he says, you can accept more of your good as well as your painful feelings. You gain strength and objectivity. Finally, you come to discover your intentional negation of all the good things in life. Now, I certainly have felt that in myself, the kind of desire, intentional desire to negate the good things. And I think that there are, with some people, I think you can see it very clearly. People that complain about the miserable life that they have, and they don't really understand or see their own intention to create that life. All right. So the first step is to understand that you do have negative intentionality.
What paragraph?
I'm on these 4 paragraphs, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th paragraphs of page 3.
Okay.
Then, last paragraph, second part of this is, second stage is, you develop an awareness that that negative intentionality does exist. You realize that it's there, but you don't want to let go of it. It exists. Then, page 4, second paragraph, then you confront the reasons for why you have negative intentionality. And it has to do, the guide says, with fear, with refusal to experience pain. Also, holding on to negative will direction is also the result of a refusal to assume self-responsibility or to deal with less than ideal circumstances. The origin of this negation of life is in childhood. Your inner insistence on forcing your bad parents, quote unquote, to become good parents out of guilt, using your misery as a weapon against them. Negative intentionality is also a means to punish life in general. All right, so why do we want to punish life? Well, he also says, next paragraph, often it is a child's only way to preserve its selfhood. If a child's inner resistance to letting go of this intent is not maintained, the personality feels threatened. The child equates giving up the resistance with capitulation, with giving up his individuality. I can certainly see that. That's very clear, right? I mean, that, a child feels his only anchor, his only sense of self comes from resistance, from his negativity. The only way to preserve selfhood. The guide says, it may seem almost inconceivable to those of you who have not made the self-discovery that one can admit to a downright senseless, wasteful attitude that does nothing but bring undesirable results and yet insist on maintaining it. All right. The next phase or the next step, last paragraph on page 4, identification. As it's mentioned in the title of the lecture, identification with the spiritual self to overcome negative intentionality. He says, okay, what part of yourself do you identify with? Do you identify with the ego exclusively? And of course, the guide says, as he almost says in every lecture, that the ego itself cannot turn the trick. The ego cannot create spiritual awareness. The ego cannot make the leap into justified faith, I guess, into the process. The ego is limited. Interchange of the deepest attitudes and feelings of an individual cannot be brought about by the very limited functions of the ego. Any profound change comes about by the ego committing itself to wanting to change and trusting in the processes of the involuntary spiritual self to bring it about. If there is no identification with the spiritual self, such trust and the necessary climate of unpressured positive expectation cannot exist. All right, so on the next page, he continues talking about identification.
Page 5.
In the middle of page 5, fourth paragraph, talks about the power of the observer self, which is something that Marion often talks about, right? I mean, the observer has the power
Yes.
over the self that has over negative intention,
Over what's being observed.
over what's being observed, right?
Yes.
So here he says, it is one thing to identify with your lower self or your masked self, but to observe and identify it is another. When you're identified with the lower self, you believe that that is all there is to you. When you identify it, observe, admit, and tackle it, you do not believe that this is all there is to you. If it were, you could not identify, observe, evaluate, analyze, and change it. So basically, the guide is saying here, the lower, last paragraph from the bottom, the lower self should be identified, the spiritual self identified with. The ego makes the identification, but gives itself up voluntarily so that it is integrated into the spiritual self.
Boom.
Boom.
Yeah. That's the key.
Yeah, that's the key. So then that's more or less my summary. And the guide, of course, says that the way through this is to observe and admit your real thoughts and feelings. Middle of page 6, middle paragraph. Experiencing all your feelings, owning up to them on all levels. Then you need to answer the question, how am I going to extricate myself from my identification with my lower self? Then 2 paragraphs from the bottom. Your resistance to giving up what you hate most in yourself is due to a false identification. Many of you are puzzled about yourselves. You do not understand why you do not want to budge from this extremely uncomfortable and undesirable inner position. You know that there's a beautiful world waiting outside. And if you deny this fact, you do it to justify your position, quote, if all is dismal anyway, then there's nothing so strange about your state. So you often make yourself believe in a terrible, senseless universe. Or if this is not the case, you cannot bring your belief in the good and beautiful universe to bear on the negative intentionality. All right. So then on page 7, you have to ask yourself what you identify with. Quote, is this really all I am? Is it true that my reality ceases to exist when I give up my negative intention and will? Is this all there is to me? Second paragraph, reach out with your tentative questions.
Page 7.
On page 7, right? Reach out with your tentative questions, questions asked with goodwill and in good faith. This is the very first step to find your way out of your prison of unnecessary suffering. And then at the end of this page, last two paragraphs, the guide suggests that we identify with our spiritual self and try to reach inward for answers, ways in which we can try out positive intentionality, which is the opposite of negative intentionality, and how to set that in motion. And then the guide asked everyone in the room to feel into the lecture and meditate about it. And there was such a beautiful energy that was generated at that time, as I remember back in 1971. It was amazing, really, really amazing. The whole room was filled with light. It felt so light. Like I said, the whole room felt like we were levitating. Just an amazing experience. Hey, Marion, were you there?
I don't remember the numbers of the lectures. I remember being at Eva's apartment for her transmissions.
In Spring Street.
I don't remember the address. All I remember is the room.
So this is a lecture packed with really important insights and very significant quotes, which are very challenging. So, I mean, I feel like negative intentionality doesn't have a huge hold on yours truly. It's always tempting to believe that if your life is a good life, you're free of bullshit, right? We have to be careful about that because obviously you can be prideful, and what may appear that you have a fantastic life has its downside. But I don't feel like I'm letting the negative intentionality run the show. But the price, of course, of that is the path of self-facing. You have to keep on facing yourself and facing your negativity and at least admitting it and being humble about it. So let's talk about this lecture. And I was wondering if we could all reflect on our personal feelings about negative intentionality and also what struck each of us about the lecture, and did we agree with all of it, and are there parts of it that seem to be very significant to each of us individually? So what do we have to say about
I
it?
just have one
Yeah,
question.
Tracy.
So one thing that I have not been able to understand is why is it what you fear you unconsciously want?
Oh.
Right,
boy, that
me
was
too.
just stuff me.
Talk about that, what you fear you unconsciously want.
Everything else I get, but I don't understand.
There was other part of this.
What you experience you unconsciously want.
Well, that makes sense though, because whatever you're experiencing, you're creating. That's the basic tenet of the path. We are creating
Right.
our lives. So of course, whatever you're experiencing, you're creating.
Yeah.
That's easy. I mean, that's just Pathwork 101. But
I mean, what do you
somebody
think, Kev?
should answer
Tracy,
that question. I
so
don't understand.
I'll
that.
address that because it
Okay.
came to me when I was reading this, that there's kind of a reference to that toward the end. If you look on page 8, the lead-in paragraph right at the top of page 8,
Yeah.
you'll see that the very unitive, let's say the non-dual statements are made here, in a sense that you are everything that exists. Okay, if that should blow your mind first before the other one. Okay, I know we hear it often, but you are everything that exists.
Yeah.
Start with that as a premise. That's the foundation for your question, I feel. Okay, it's right at the top. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and then it says there is nothing you are not.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, okay,
Yeah.
but now if, and this is just a logical statement
Mhm.
first, because until you experience that, it just is pure logic.
Mhm.
But if you are everything that exists, okay, and that is somewhat challenging first off, but then if you are everything that exists, then I put a little arrow there on page 2, which is the statement you had a question on.
Yeah.
So now think about that. Whatever you fear, you unconsciously want. Well, why? Because you are that thing as well. You are everything that exists, but you've denied that you are that thing. When you deny something, you cut it off. That's not me. You deny part of yourself, and thus the fear arises because that thing is you. So it's part of the denial of the true self. It's part of the denial that you are everything. all things. If you were separate, that could not exist. That feeling, that fear, that statement wouldn't be true. That makes sense.
May I comment about that?
Sure.
It's just a light comment about fear, because something I learned, I was told, not to be a fear of the fear or judge the fear, but become friends with the fear and sit down and have a cup of tea with the fear and see what fear has to say. And it doesn't have to lead the show, but it's a normal human emotion. It's not of spirit, but we are both human and spirit. So I find that very helpful to just, sometimes sit down and say, well, tell me what's going on, with fear, and get to know the fear and have it my companion when it's there without running the show. That's all.
Yeah, there's a famous story about one of the Buddhas. There's a famous story about one of the Buddhas, maybe some of you heard it, where to reach enlightenment, they go in the cave, right? And they're barricaded in there, and somebody brings them food once a day. So the person who's seeking enlightenment has been told that the hungry ghosts will appear at some point, and you need to be ready for them when they come. And so the Lama is sitting there, and he's meditating, and of course the hungry ghosts come, and at first he's a little bit afraid, and then he says, well, why don't you sit down and let's have some tea together. And he serves the hungry ghost the tea, and then they disappear. So that was his greatest fear, were the hungry ghosts. But he greeted them with love.
Mm.
I think I get a little bit there.
Juan, thoughts about fear?
Yeah, what stating, answering to Tracy's questions, because this is very, very profound statement here, and it's a psychological thing. Seems like people in psychology, they to them is a normal thing, but I think here the key word is the unconscious. The first sentence here, where it says, what people about this, what is it? Whatever people fear, they unconsciously want. I think the key word is unconsciously here. Basically, let's say, for example, that you want to be wealthy because you fear poverty, let's say. So this is happening unconsciously. I want wealth because I fear poverty. So you want the wealth. So you want the poverty unconsciously again. You want to experience that poverty so that you can appreciate the wealth. You know what I mean? Does it make sense? It's basically all these things taking place in the unconscious. In other words, you need to create or go through that opposite experience in order to actually, connect with what you consciously want. No, it's kind of deep here.
I wouldn't even bring wealth into it though in that
Yeah,
statement.
but I'm just
because that's
trying
the either or issue.
trying
that
to
I
give
think
an
that could be
example.
confusing. No, good example. I would bring only the poverty of your example into
Right,
that.
okay,
Now
yeah.
take that directly as it states in that.
Yeah,
What you fear, you want.
but unconsciously though. See, to me, the key word is unconscious.
Regardless of conscious or
because you're not
unconscious,
aware of
you
this
get-
one thing.
Fine.
Yeah.
But once you do a certain amount of work, you realize you can't bullshit yourself that things are just unconscious, so they're not me. That that's you. So
Right.
that's clear. Okay. But what to me, when I hear you speak about that duality,
Right.
then it's easy for the ego to go, well, yeah, of course. I fear the poverty and I want the rich. Okay. It's that's
No, you
that is
can
not the
mix the
statement.
other. But
To me, I feel like what this statement is saying is you want to experience poverty
right.
because there is a good part of you
that's going to bring
that
liberation.
wants to experience all aspects, all things. That's what it says. You are all things. Back to that statement. You are here to experience a myriad of aspects of yourself. And toward the end of the lecture, if you remember, it also talks about, well, how could accessing the higher self be a wrong thing or done badly? Or how could be using the lower self be a good thing?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's the same kind of duality with richness and poorness.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same.
Let me give it. So the only thing that I can think of that I fear is something happening to one of the kids. I can't believe that I unconsciously want something bad to happen to one of my kids.
Well, that's a third party kind of a fear. I mean, it's not about yourself.
So is that the thing?
I think that there's a big difference here because I think that's a different thing. I think we should explore that. It's interesting.
So it's,
Yeah.
Because the question is
but
like,
it would have
if you're
to be-
afraid,
but it would have to be too. You see, if something really
Sure.
bad were to happen to one of my children, I am going to be affected by that as well.
Yeah. Not sure.
I mean, if I
Maybe-
don't
maybe-
consciously want that, I have really no grasp of that because I want more than anything else for my children to be safe.
Yeah.
well, perhaps that's
So
a,
I'm really struggling to
Well, perhaps
understand
that's
how
a-
I unconsciously want them harmed.
well, maybe that's a test of your lack of faith. In other words, it's part of the pathwork, the tenets that everything that happens is right and fair and appropriate and necessary, right?
Oh, well, that may be. I mean, I understand. I mean, Jan Grigsby lost her son. I understand
Yes.
that people lose loved ones. But that doesn't mean that I want it to happen to me.
No.
But I accept it if it does because, well, I mean, we almost lost our son in an accident in Turks, and I accept that if he were to have died, which he almost did, then that's his path, and then he's chosen that for his own development, and then I have to accept that. I can't interfere with his path, but I certainly don't want it.
But I mean, that's not a real fear of yours, is it?
Yes.
I mean, that's manufactured fear. In other words, but no, I mean, that's like something that,
I've lived with fear ever since I remember. I mean, I think a lot of mothers and probably fathers too. You have anywhere from a concern, especially in the teenage years when
Yeah.
they go out and they're driving. You're not there yet. Buckle your
Coming.
seatbelt. Buckle your seatbelt.
I can see it.
Buckle your seatbelt. To more real fears. If you end up with a child that has a cancer or maybe they have a very serious drug. We have friends that have lost children to drug addiction, to the opioid crisis. So, but I think as a parent, we all have. I mean, it's not something that cripples me. No, I mean, I don't go around, biting oh my God, what am I going to do if something happens to Chad or Kira? But it's not but it's there, because things happen. And so
I'm
I
not
just
sure if
don't-
we're,
I just don't believe for 1 second I unconsciously want.
Well,
something.
not Tracy. Tracy doesn't. But that's the thing is, what do you identify with? And I think that's what this lecture really tries to stress is that so long as you identify yourself simply as Tracy,
Yeah.
simply as part of this in this
Who
life,
our
as
substance.
part of this meat bag
Yeah.
that you are with
Yeah.
this house and this
Yeah.
family.
Okay.
And I'm not saying those things are insignificant,
No,
but I'm
okay,
saying that
yeah.
when you judge yourself only as
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
then you will be blind to this fear want relationship.
Yeah.
It's only when you're outside of that in the unitive
Yeah.
toward the end, that's why I brought that up,
Yeah.
that you can appreciate that there is not a duality, but there's actually a singularity,
Oh, yeah.
a oneness.
Yeah, like if I were to, as long as I'm identified, as with this particular
Right.
form manifestation that I'm a woman, I'm Tracy, this that who doesn't want her children to be seriously harmed, but and if I were just identified with the non-manifested energy that I am, the consciousness that I am, and then I would know, well, really nothing can happen because the form is very vulnerable. All forms are vulnerable. Everything arises and passes away. That's the nature of form, the form manifestation. But the consciousness and the energy is what's omnipresent and continuing. But I get all that, but I still don't see how, that fear, fear may be too strong of a word. I don't think I live in fear of something, but it's just, especially like when they were teenagers and they go out and drive, and I just don't see how that's something I unconsciously want to experience. I did experience almost losing Chad, and it wasn't pleasant, and I certainly don't want to do it again. So, I just don't get how what you fear you unconsciously want.
Let me see.
Yeah.
I can say
I
something.
can't get there. I just think I don't.
Yeah, why?
Well, yeah, another thing I'm thinking about is,
Maybe it's lost in translation.
well, no, it's really, it's true, actually. I mean, I can intuitively feel the reality of it, but it's hard to put into words. But take love, for example.
The what?
Love
Love.
or self-responsibility. Don't we all want love? Can we not say that we fear love? We also fear love, I feel. Because you know why we fear it? Because it will bring a lot of responsibility to love someone. So you want love, but you also fear it. You know
Well,
what
that
I mean?
I can see, but I don't fear love. But I can see that.
You fear love. I mean, we fear love. A lot of
I
people
think
fear love,
that-
and also self-responsibility.
It's helpful to look at the
We
different
want
kinds of
we want
fear.
to be responsible, but also we also
Yeah.
fear because of what is gonna.
Yeah.
It's
But
gonna.
I don't have that. I don't.
Well, I think we
I
have
don't
to
feel love and I
define,
feel self-responsibility.
we have to define
Well, okay.
fear.
I just don't.
Okay.
I feel like we're like having a
Consciously again,
Socratic
it's a
dialogue
key, I
here.
think.
I do fear something really bad happening to one of my children.
See, I think we have to talk about different kinds of fear. Like, for example, I mean, if you grab
Sometimes
hold,
you just can't.
if you grab hold of one definition of fear that you may feel this closely with, perhaps we can make the bridge to the other kinds of fears. Like, for example, if somebody's really always afraid they're going to get fired. Uh-oh, I'm in the
Right.
office today, I'm fucking up. Oh, the boss is going to come by. Oh
Well, you
no.
just bring it on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You really want it to happen
Yeah.
because
Of the place.
you're sick of it.
Yeah.
Either you're
Yeah. No, I
afraid.
know that. Yeah.
Okay, now that's
But
that's clear.
remember, you're drawing it to yourself because you want to experience
Yeah.
more of yourself
Yeah.
than what you really are. You've already limited yourself by saying, "Oh my God, am I going to get fired? Oh my God, am I going to get fired? Oh my God, am I going to get fired?"
Yeah, no,
If you keep saying that,
Yeah.
you've limited who you are.
Yeah.
And that's a clear example, right?
I know that seems easy for me to understand.
Well, that same is true with loss of children, and I don't want to belittle it.
Yeah.
But the same exact statement can be said with loss of children. It's not that you must have to go through it, but when it becomes such a strong fear,
Yeah.
you bring it on yourself
Well,
that your children
no, that's
will
true.
experience these
Well, that's
things.
true because whatever
And
you
you'll
fear,
experience that fear.
whatever you resist, you're gonna
Yeah,
attract.
fear
to
you
it.
That's what it's
I get
really
all
is.
that. That's
That's
just
really-
energy 101.
yeah.
But
Right.
what I don't get is still how, because I fear it. or
I'm
I
just
feel
not sure if
that I
we're,
want it.
I'm not sure if fear is the right word to apply to what you're talking about.
Well, that may be the.
I mean, you're talking about a tremendous concern about someone you love. And the idea that something could happen to them is sort of a maternal broadening of your consciousness to envelop them. You want to envelop them with your sphere of love and protection.
Well, most mothers don't want
Most
something
mothers-
bad to happen to their children.
For sure.
This is certainly true.
Any healthy.
And fathers too. I will say
Fathers.
My
throwing
mother-
out the F word.
My mother was so
Fathers do.
afraid.
Can I just add something?
Okay, so go ahead, Barbara.
As as a mother,
Why not?
I have concern for my son. He's not healthy. He has issues, in terms of like eating too much, whatever they are. So I fear for his health. I have concerns, but the way I think about it is when I sort of meditate on it, sometimes, I feel my love for him. I feel, wanting my goodwill towards him, but I also connect with what is that part of me that, might have the negative intent, like, where is it? What's my part in it? What I that's the best way I can say it. What's my part in it? What, not taking, it's like, I don't have that power, full responsibility to create something. That's his life, but I can look at where I might have contributed or maybe continue to contribute.
Can I ask something? When you say that you fear something and you want it, maybe if we reframe want, that you need it for your own development or your own experience?
Correct. No, that's correct. I would agree completely.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I think it's meant in that case.
Yeah.
It's not an egoistic want. It's not like, oh, wow, yeah, it'd be wonderful if my children just had an awful.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not ego, of course, right? But it's exactly how you put it. That's how I wanted to say it. Yeah. But a higher version of you desires it. Let's call it your essence or your higher self or something larger than what you normally walk around every day.
To
let's
go
just
through,
say.
to go through, right? So you can switch, actually come and transcend that part that needed.
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly.
And that kind of bridges what Barbara is saying, that it's something that you have to look at your own part in what those feelings are about.
I have another one.
And what does that do for you
Right.
ultimately?
Yeah.
And then there's just the whole thing about desire, the polarities of desire and fear being part of the duality, right? In other words, you're torn by desire. You're afraid of something, you want something, but both of them are not in truth. I mean, there's also that part of it, right? That's why the Buddhists and people try to put forward desirelessness as a spiritual state.
Mhm.
Not magnetized by anything. If you're magnetized by something, then you're part of the illusion. You want that thing that you're magnetized by. That's part of it too, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up just a different point. If we could move a little bit forward on page 3. It talks a bit about, what happens right during this, basically. Not anything specific there causes me to read, but
What paragraph are you doing?
it's all in the beginning of it. It's
Okay.
basically the first 3 paragraphs that made me write this note, basically next to it.
No.
And the note was, when, remember, it's talking about being aware of when negative intentionality arises. And once you have that awareness, things get a lot easier because now you're not really fighting the currents all the time, let's say, of what you're putting into the world. You're putting it into the world, at least, right? So you can own the negative intentionality that you are putting out there.
Right.
And in my path, at least, we've talked before many times about the conversations that we'll have in the 3 voices and so forth, and then how we've gone through phases of identifying the negative intentionality with us, arguing about it, or having multiple voices, tear into it basically, and really come to see what the face of, I don't know, let's just call it the lower self here, but that demon basically looks like to you. And everybody's would be a little different, let's just say. But for me, I just wrote down these notes on the side and I scribbled, I said, when I go through, now at least, when negative intentionality hits, it's like a flip of a switch. It's very clear that the switch just flipped. Like it goes from like, oh, Kev's kind of cool, he's like Kev, and then it goes, oh, what happened to Kev? Like immediately you can just feel the energy just toggle. Okay.
That's the trigger.
And right, well, something triggers it, right? But what happens, what I can feel, like you can of course go, oh yeah, that guy pissed me off. But the thing is to go, oh, I'm now stuck. Like I just wrote here, the switch flips, and I hate living in that because it feels stagnant immediately. Like after you do a certain amount of path work, for me, it just feels like a anathema. It feels like you're suffocating yourself almost when the switch flips, because you're kind of like, oh, suddenly I cut myself off from other people just in that instantaneous moment. And because you can observe that happening, because again, you have to work at the observation, but once you get that observation, then you can recognize, oh yeah, wow, that's not really what I want. Who's I? I, not I in this moment, but I can see it as an observer that I in this moment is stuck in a form of some pre-programming I wrote here, right? And a desire not to change in that moment, a desire to just stick with whatever that item is, that item, whatever it might be, is more important than life. It's more important than the flow of people. It's more important than community. It's more important, whether or not that's being right, whether or not that's protecting somebody against making a bad decision, whatever. There's a lot of ways that can come out. As a parent, it certainly comes out as the secondary with your children, of course, if they have different ways of wanting to do things, or, but it feels like your feelings are just cramped, completely cramped. And that kind of connects with exactly what the guide also says toward the end, which is on page 7, in the middle of there. He starts talking about, dying into your true self, where your real feelings and your real being are. And then he says, you will experience, I think this is now paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. You will experience your real feelings, some of them quite painful, right? But the pain will be so much easier to bear than the position you now maintain. So when I read that, it connects with basically the unconscious living that I remember going, pain bad, I don't want to experience it, I'll just stay stuck, fuck everyone. That's basically the feeling. But then now it's not that. What it turns into for me now is more like, oh yeah, that's painful, okay, bring it on. All right, yeah, let me really, really see that. Like, why did I do that? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that just I wasn't in my right mind. I was acting like a child. Or yeah, I need to go to that person and talk to them about it. Or, oh yeah, that was a bad situation. And the pride won't be there if you can recognize that you're bigger than just that specific anger or event or whatever. Like, you're bigger than an event. I'm bigger than an event, right? And you get lost in the event, let's just say.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of what the guide talks through this here. And like the whole thing, when I was reading it through about negative intentionality, what I want to do is kind of, just like maybe you said, you think generally that, well, we're pretty good people, right? I mean, we all have that kind of feeling, I think, because we spent a lot of effort into working through a lot of these things. But yeah, I don't want to bullshit myself either. I mean, it happens. It happens, and you have to be able to call it out when it happens, or at least that's what it feels right for me.
Right, or observe it.
Observe it. Yep. At the very least, observe it. Even if you can't make that next move,
Exactly.
at least
Just
observe it. Yes.
And don't
Right.
bullshit yourself.
Don't bullshit yourself.
Just
Yeah.
observe it.
Exactly.
Okay, you were just a jerk.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Could I comment on that?
Yeah, Marianne, go ahead.
Okay, this is just a comment. It's not a teaching. Love the word observer. When the guide gets to that, and everybody's at their own relationship with that. So my experience is, I'm so grateful because the guide somewhere in a lecture, and I forget, I don't know which one it was, said the first step of transformation, not looking, but transformation, is observation. It's kind of like a mantra with me. Like I sing it sometimes. The first step of transformation is observation. So once I can get to reporting in, it allows the opening in my energy field for my higher self to transform whatever the issue is. It's getting to the point of telling the observer what it is and let the observer come in. It's just exactly what this lecture brings up, because it was told to me. And who's the observer? Spirit, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the observer? Spirit, of course. So it sometimes takes a lot of digging, a lot of work that we do in the path work, images, image work, all that, understanding my personality type, which is very emotional. Then once I can get to the telling the other what's going on with me and awaken the observer, it starts transformation. Then I just allow. I don't have to do the work. It's about allowing, being open, allowing, doing my meditation, prayer, energy, opening, because it will transform then once I can get to reporting it to the observer. So anyway, it's a sharing. It's not an instruction.
You're well said. Hey, Jordan, what are your thoughts? It's good to see you again, by the way. You weren't here at our last meeting.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I was exhausted last time and I fell asleep after work. This has a certain feeling to me from the creative, the lectures about creativity, because this is, I don't know why that struck me. If we think back 2 times ago, was it 2 times ago we did the the lecture on creativity. We did it not that far back. And it seems to me that part of this is because this talks about why we are who we are because it is what we have created, right? In effect, it says that here, something like that, about our negativity and positive energies, but our negative energy creates what we are, as well as our positive energies. And that's what feeds the fire of not coming to term. I mean, it feeds that aspect where we say the reason we can't have what we want, where we want to go, is because of the negative energy. And that's what we can't own. And that's the part of us that we reject. And that's that dichotomy. We reject ourselves. And in that, that's why we place it outside and say it is whatever is out there is what's doing it to us. Because if we admit that, then we would admit to not being who we aspire to.
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, we create both positively and negatively.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to make a comment on page 5 in the on the fourth 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe the fourth paragraph here, page 5. Something that has struck me, something that I feel that I made the mistake, and I also observe that in many religions we make I see anyway, from my view, that mistake is made when and I'll just read the whole paragraph here and then I try to comment about it. It says, if you identify with the higher self or your spirit without truly being aware of your lower self, mask self, your defenses, your dishonest devices, and your negative intentionality, then your identification with the higher self becomes an escape and an illusion. Under these circumstances, it is not at all a truthful or a real experience. It is much more like paying lip service to a philosophy you believe in on the purely intellectual level. It is all very well to know that you are a divine spirit, that you are a divine manifestation with potentially limitless power to change yourself and your life, that you are the very spirit of the universe in manifest form. This is true, and yet it is a half-truth when this kind of identification overlooks the part of you which needs your scrutiny and candid attention. I mean, it's not a powerful thing that I feel that I myself, I know I fall into that. We tend to focus too much on the good part, the universe and in ourselves, and kind of like, yes, I'm the divine. And I see like people with all this affirmation, yeah, I am the divine, I'm this and that and the other. And it's beautiful. We are that, truly. But if we don't go inside within and really work with the material that is actually obstructing this potential, this limitless potentiality that is within us, then we're really wasting our time in a way, right?
I agree.
And I see that like in my one of the paths that I follow, and I don't want to mention any name, but I see that people in many religions, actually, I see this, that we tend to exalt that beautiful part of us and totally neglect going to the dark part, those ugly area, that impurity that dwells right within us as well.
Ignoring the trash.
And it obstructs the divine in us. So
and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work at the end. You're just like you're really gonna wear because it's maybe you experience you focus on the divine and the light and the beautiful and it's all good and you maybe experience some of that, But to really transcend, you need to go
Right.
through that.
Joe was, he made me laugh last week, and he was talking about the people at church, oh, we're all, this, and then they're leaving and then the parking lot, and the next thing you know, they're flipping.
Yeah,
over.
right. You see what I mean? Exactly so, yeah.
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 And he would have me, these have me.
You gotta go to that evil, man. In order to reach the good. Oh, it wasn't me. I I'm just saying.
But that's
It's a
a typical,
Yeah.
Sure.
especially at a certain point in the past, at certain point in your development, I think we all realize the potential for our divineness, and of course we want
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's like, you almost want to skip over.
Yeah.
I'm just, what's the, in Wizard of Oz, don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Remember, it's like,
You got
just-
it.
you're in Oz,
Yeah.
everything is fine. Don't
Yeah.
pay any attention to that man behind the curtain.
And I actually heard people say, well, just ignore that, that
Yeah.
negative part. This sort of negative,
No,
just ignore
but it
it.
doesn't work.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that's the
You'll
one
never
thing
connect with the
that,
actual truth.
that struck me about this lecture more than anything else, which is that negative intentionality and its many manifested forms, and hate,
Oh,
blah, blah,
So many-
that just blocks you
totally
from the experience of
connecting with that divine.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like it's almost like trying to have a water go down, downstream, and it's full of rocks. It just can't, and you
Right.
gotta get in there and get those rocks out to let the
Precisely.
water
Slow.
flow to the village below. If you but we don't know. I mean, I get it. Who wants to do that? It's painful to have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you are really a jerk sometimes, and and you're selfish, and you're self-focused, and you have negative thoughts, and like whatever faults that we all have, which are.
Yeah, we have that ideal image. We want to believe that
Right.
ideal image of ourselves.
It's not. I
Yeah.
remember when I first started the Pathwork 10 years ago. I was taught by the guide that the mere observation of one's faults will cause them to start to pixelate.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
plagiarized Marion twice now with the word
Mm.
observation and pixelate, and I thought to myself, because I'm the kind of person like I you got to do something. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I'm trained to,
Yeah.
I mean, what do you mean a mere observation is going to cause it? I thought, this is a load of crap,
You're actually dreaming like
But I thought to myself, well, you know what? I got nothing to lose. I've gone through, I'm 68, so I guess I started the Pathwork when I was 58. You're doing it your way for 58 years. You're still miserable. So let's maybe and I just started. And of course, it's true, that the mere observation. But the thing I remember about those first 3 or 4 years was that it was so painful, because before I started the Pathwork, I thought I was a really good person. I mean, I am a good person, but I had no conscious awareness of the negativity inside of me, and which it, for me personally, manifests primarily in negative thoughts. Because I don't do bad things and say mean things. I'm not that it's not the way it manifests to me in thoughts. And I was like so shocked at the negative thought patterns and intentionality that those thought patterns, then you find out that your thoughts are manifesting agents. Oh my goodness. So if you're thinking a negative, and then the real thing is then the karmic effect, because whatever you put out into the universe comes back to you. So if I'm thinking you're a jerk, that energy is going to come right back to me. So I'm hurting you, I'm hurting myself, I'm blocking myself from experiencing my spiritual. I mean, so you can't ignore. You can't ignore the trash in the room. You will never get it vacuumed. No matter how, it will never be clean, no matter how much you vacuum it, if you don't pick the trash up first. So we have to.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. Could I comment on that?
Marion, go on, of course.
Oh,
That's so it's always so helpful what you're saying. And it comes back to, for me, working with my personality defense type. That's always a key for me, because I'm the emotion type. So I tend to, and having tried to be the good girl and all that, on the unconscious level of the emotion type defense is hatred and anger and rage. because I've given up my real needs to try to get it from somebody else. So for me, what helps me a lot, and I take great delight in it. So again, I'm just sharing this, is that I have my to-do list every day of things that I do. And then I have some tools in my toolbox, like meditation and certain exercise and all. But one of mine is have at least 3 complaint sessions a day. And so for me, complaining is a gateway to true self-assertion. So it's a gateway. And I can't, and the emotion body, and this is true from core energetics, does not transform unless expressed. And that's why we have so much acting out all over the world, people shooting each other in wars and all that. And but when it's healthily expressed through a session, or I always tell my higher self, I'm now going to have a complaint session because somebody has triggered something in me. Nobody's causing my anger or my irritation or anything. They're triggering it in me. And so I just tell my higher self, I've been triggered by something or other, and I'm not going to release it from my energy field. I get out my old Pataka, which I've had for years, in my pillow, and I just let it rip, and I kill everybody off, and I complain like crazy. But my intention is, that word intention in this lecture is so important, because I state my intention. My intention is to clear this from my energy field that got triggered, so that I may be filled with I'm talking to my higher self, your light, love, and life. I call it the 3 L's, your light, love, and life. So then when I express it all in this safe way, and that's what the emotion type needs to do, is then it just flows, and I vibrate, and I know how to vibrate and ground it. And I start smiling. It has nothing to do with who triggered me. Nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's me embodying the keys to my own dominant personality type. Yeah.
Teresa wants to talk.
So I wanted
Teresa,
to-
yeah.
Hi. Oh, you don't have to bring. the
No,
chair
I'll bring
forward.
you, but you're
Because I'm
too far
very
away.
self-conscious. I actually prefer.
Okay, all right, be far away
So,
then.
So I wanted to agree with Tracy, and I wanted to add also connected with Marianne is doing. I've been meditating for like 17 years now. We are Raja yogis. We meditate twice a day. I'm on a spiritual path, and we're discussing this with Juan. It's just developing my higher self, and my higher self developed to a very large degree. I do experience moments of enlightenment, like I told you, the radical well-being and others. Very powerful, extremely powerful, like something shifts in my brain. But then I had a very traumatic, abusive childhood, and I wasn't aware how much pain and negativity is swept under the rug. So now when Pathwork came in, it really started flowing. So I did have all sorts of experiences with meditation, and my intention is obviously to be in my higher self, to listen to the soul, to be guided by this soul. But then I wasn't aware about all this negativity and all of this probably negative intention, like against the parents. Like, I'll prove you because I'll be such a loser that you fucked me up for life, like I can relate to this. And I'm sure you probably can. It's like, oh, that's how you brought me up. See, now I'm going to be like this. So I didn't realize, and also how much pain there is from the unresolved trauma, from the things that I never got as a child. So this was actually blocking me to the development of my higher self, because there was so much under the rug that as soon as something went wrong in my life, I wouldn't even want to meditate. So I made like God into my parents. So now I'm really angry at you, God, because you've done this and that to me. So I'm not going to meditate. So Pathwork, what it did for me, it kind of sort of unblocked that black negative channel and opened the rug with all this trash. And so now I'm taking out the trash. And I'm also emotional type like Marianne. So I will have a fit and a complaint session and a trigger. Express one is always like, yeah, you have a right to express yourself. But actually, I feel like my spiritual development really went so much higher because of Pathwork. Because our Raja Yoga never addresses, and it is true that when your higher self develops to a certain degree, the light and the love and the comfort and the incredible growth of the spirit, you're larger than yourself, you do feel like a part of, you have this unity state. It does help, to think, but because I work one-on-one, that's what she's doing. She says that mature, healthy adult ego goes back and gets that her lower, and gets that negative, little child, negative and obnoxious, and because it's hurt, and it comforts it, and it finds it, and it gives it the companionship it never had. It's like, you're not alone, because I'm here now, and I am here to protect you, and I'm here to love you, and I'm here to heal you. And that really does transform. That transforms that obnoxious, negative, spiteful little thing into somebody who finally feels loved, and therefore can open up a little bit, and this whole thing can start flowing. Again, with the triggers and stuff, but you can immediately say, okay, I got triggered. What happened? Where are you? I'm here. You're not alone. I'm here. And holding that little girl, even like mentally or even physically, I go to the bedroom, I hold myself. I'm here. You're not alone. You're okay. We'll be okay. You're safe. Because I never felt safe as a child. So giving her that love, that attention, that safety, actually healing her, and then she's not so spiteful and so hateful and so negative anymore, because there is a grown-up in the room now that cares for her. So that's one thing I wanted to say, and to both of you, tremendous spiritual growth because of taking out the trash and cleaning out the trash and addressing where the pain is and not escaping from it, but like Kevin was saying, bring it on. I'm here. It's painful. Okay, let me feel it. And I remember my first, one of the few sessions that I had with Jane, when she uncovered something from my childhood, and I was like, I cannot take it. It's going to be too painful. She's like, 15 minutes. The hardest pain never lasts longer than 15 minutes. And I was literally told I was going to die. She was sitting there with the watch, and she's like, okay, 15 minutes. How are you feeling? And I'm like, it is off. It's better.
7,
Yeah, one.
page 7, because I think it's important here, because I think at the end, I see that at the end of the lecture, the guy actually, because we go through all this talking, but in the page 6 and 7, he actually gives clues of the way out, how we can overcome all this, right? And it is important. I mean, we talked about somewhat about it, about the observer and the being observed, and the importance of our identity, and really kind of like pinpointing the aspect of ourselves that we are identifying with. Are we identifying with the higher self, or the lower self, or the mass self, or the ego self? And then and really become aware of that. It's like, okay, when you are, because the thing is, according to what the guy says, we tend, most of us, we have the inclination to, when we, I mean, mostly I think what we observe is the lower self, all the negativity, we tend to observe the negative aspect of ourselves, and then we maybe unconsciously, partially, we kind of like reach a conclusion that that's what we are.
Yeah.
In other words, when we connect with that negative aspect of ourselves, we kind of generalize and think, oh, this is me, and you totally forget that no, this is just an aspect of yourself that is coming to the fore, because it needs to overcome, it needs to be transcended.
Right.
And so I think that that part is very important, where he talks about where he talks about the way out, and the importance of it.
Yeah.
And
That's
he
so
said,
true, Juan.
yeah, and he said, when I observe, actually, let me read the part. This is on page 6 that he says this. Okay, so the personality, he talks about when we which part of the personality we connect with, and then he says at the end, as long as we don't reach that state of unification, we will be a mixture of the three of them. In other words, it's not like we are the lower self, we are the higher self. Until we reach that unitive state, we'll continue to experience the three aspects of ourselves, meaning the ego self, the lower self, and the higher self. So it will be like a terrible mistake, for us to conclude that we are just a negative aspect of ourselves, or the ego self even, that we are also the higher self. And
I think that switches,
that is
it
fluctuates.
And you are in the court, you're going to be all in your ego self, right? You want to win this case, somebody's paying you, you have your knowledge, you have your studies, you're going to be in your ego self, you're going to be the best lawyer in this courtroom, right? when you sit down to meditate, you're going to be in your higher self, especially if you're experienced meditator. Within minutes, you're going to be in your higher self.
Well, we also win victories when we're able to bring our higher selves into our jobs. You know, like in the
Real
courtroom,
victories.
you know, all of a sudden, I'm sure Tracy's had moments in litigation where, uh-oh, she's going to do something a little different, and it makes a difference, you know?
Yeah.
It's like the flow state.
That's actually
Yeah.
called like
Yeah, right.
being that consciousness and being the word and not be,
Yeah.
you know,
It
taking
reminds me of
other-
the story in The Wisdom of the Sands, you know, this one of these Rajneesh books where there's a guy who's climbing up the mountain, and he's climbing up a very steep cliff, and he grabs for a tree, a little shrub, and the tree breaks, and he's hanging there by a tiny piece of bark, and he goes, God, please save me. I know I haven't believed in you. I haven't believed in you at all, but if you save me, I swear I'm going to renounce all the world. I'm going to believe in you. I'm going to worship you. And God goes, okay, let go of the branch. And he says, you think I'm crazy? So it's like, if you are willing to not identify with the ego,
Right.
you know, you got to take the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Let me just read to
Okay.
conclude my point here on page 7. Kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4. The last of the 4th paragraph and the 5th one, where the guy actually, you know, relating to you were sharing earlier, Teresa, about you expressing your feelings and going through the, you know, to the trash. He says, if you are willing to feel your feelings regardless of their nature, you will know who you are. If you are not willing, you must remain that hard, stiffened, limited self. Here lies your choice. So that's a good thing to I guess to realize. And he also goes on to say, it cannot be claimed that when you give up your negative intentionality, you will instantly experience universal bliss or even earthly bliss. You will experience your real feeling, some of them quite painful, but the pain will be so much easier to bear than the position of you maintaining in its own flowing, of you not maintain in its flowing nature. It will carry you into new and better states, like the river of life itself. That's very promising.
Yeah,
right?
that's so many.
You're unblocking, you're allowing the flow.
Right, there's so many quotes, you know, every paragraph, right?
Yeah, that's a
is-
beautiful
is-
one right there.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
All right, so
Right.
any other thoughts, my friends?
Well, I have a question, Alan, if you have any remembrance, you know, you were a young child, you know, a young teen when this happened. It talks, you know, it says you can't describe the powerful energy, but in my mind, I hear, you know, that the lectures about, you know, like acknowledging your negative intentionality. And I'm wondering, was it people sharing in that moment their negative intentionality of recognizing it? And, you know, I just, you know, I guess I see the scene of like catharsis and people, you know, it's kind of like the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, which is I really I find that distressful, that holiday sometimes, but that aspect of recognizing, like I haven't been my best, you know, you know, I regret all my negativity, I regret all that, you know, and I guess you know, I was just curious if you know, if you had any more remembrance you could share.
Well, I think I remember that I think some people were crying, and like people recognized that their negative intentionality and wanted to give it up. I think that's the feeling. But I just remember a golden light, like a big lightness in the room. I think people kind of like, okay, I see this and I want to give this up. I don't have to hold on to my negative intent. I think that was the feeling that there was.
I mean,
Thank you.
it's hard to imagine, Alan, that you were hearing this as it was being
Transmitted.
received and transmitted.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have the document. We've been reading it over the course of the month. Some of us have read it at other times. I'm sure you've read it a number of times. So it's almost inconceivable that, over the period of whatever time it was, an hour, that you were receiving this, to be able to even comprehend what was being said to you. You know what I'm saying? It had to have been a great deal. And so how much could actually really sink into anybody? Maybe it was experiential more than going into the mind, right? That it was like you were just connected with the energy.
Well, it's a lot more than an intellectual experience.
Yeah.
I'll say that. It's a lot more than trying to understand. There's a lot more than following a quote unquote lecture, that like a professor might give. It was sort of like it's a nourishing thing, like you're a dry plant and you're getting water.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, this is like really nourishing me. It's sort of like the words are one thing and the energy is another thing.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Speak, talking to your soul.
The actual feeling of
Yeah.
yeah.
So you absorb probably much deeper from that than just reading it, right?
Yeah.
Also, I wasn't there. I didn't really. I heard the lectures in Bill Solomon's loft. I never was at Eva's. I was more like 1974.
Yeah, this was in the law.
1975. Well, I was later, but
Yeah.
I do remember from that time, my recollection was that there was a lot more identification with the lower self than there is perhaps in this group here today. And so it might have been taken in a different way.
Mm.
Just my take.
What do you think, Marion? Being
Oh, yeah, because I remember the Spring Street loft and all. I had started with being in Eva's apartment before we went to the loft. But I think that lower self aspect is very true because when we got the center, upstate and all, we were so focused. We were known. We were famous for how to transform the lower self. We were so much into that it was like it crossed over into an obsession kind of. And it took when people started going to Finhorn up in northern Scotland. Eva went over there and others went up to Finhorn, and they had so much of the higher, they manifested amazing things. They grew big vegetables in tiny little sandy soil. They needed a greenhouse, and all of a sudden one day a truck comes down the road and there's a folded up greenhouse on it. They got free. They were like the higher self, but they started getting very popular. And so a lot of people started coming to Finhorn who had a lot of lower self aspects, and they didn't know how to work with it at Finhorn. And so we did. So Eva went over there. I didn't go over there, but others went over there and to help train the people at Finhorn how you work with the lower self. But they brought back how to be with the higher self, because we were so not focusing on our higher self. Was there, of course, but we were so focused on our kind of pride of how to do the lower self. And so that brought it more together and started more meditations. We didn't always have meditation times. And we started having meditations, silent retreats, and all that. It really shifted the patterns in the pathwork, because there wasn't so much focus on the lower self for so long. We made that shift then.
Yeah. So shall we do our meditation?
Could you do that light?
All right.
Joel?
The Christmas tree will remain up.
The Christmas tree will remain.
Maybe the Christmas tree can be our illumination.
Okay, you want to blow Candle.
The candle. I'll take the candle.
Because you can turn the camera on. so they can
Yeah,
see
we'll
it,
do the
right?
candle here. Here, if you could pick those books up. Let's go. I wanted to read just a from that page you were on.
Now, little boy.
No, I got it.
You okay?
All right. The commitment must always be to the truth of the self, what it really feels and thinks and is. If commitment to the self is the aim, then you cannot fail to realize yourself. You will experience new depths of feelings. You will even welcome the pain, for it is real and flowing. It is moving and is totally you. All right, 15 minutes.